"I need the money tomorrow," my daughter said, not asked, not pleaded, not even pretending the sentence was a request anymore. And the way she placed the folder on my coffee table made it sound less like a daughter coming to her father for help, and more like a creditor delivering a demand notice. Her husband stood behind her with his hands in his pockets, tall, expensive, bored, his eyes moving around my living room as if he was already deciding which pieces of it would look better in his own house. Brandon had always had that gift, the ability to enter someone else's space and behave as though hospitality was proof of ownership. Emily sat on the edge of the sofa with her knees pressed together, her pearl necklace sliding between her fingers, the same pearl necklace I had given her on her 30th birthday, because she had cried on the phone for 3 days about feeling invisible among her wealthier friends. She wore sadness like jewelry now, polished, intentional, brought out for special occasions and returned to its box when the transaction ended. Her voice stayed soft, but the softness had teeth. "Daddy," she said again, as if the word itself was collateral. "We need it by noon tomorrow." Brandon finally looked up from his phone and added, "Don't be late, Rob." Just like that. Don't be late. Not please. Not thank you. Not I am sorry this has come to your door again. Don't be late, as if he had summoned a driver. As if the man who had paid for his wedding, his house, his startup disasters, his children's tuition, and the illusion of his manhood was now nothing more than a courier with an aging heart and access to liquidity. I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not even a human one, not really. It was the expression a man wears when something inside him has finally gone still after years of being pulled, stretched, bruised, and renamed as love. "Okay," I said. One word, flat, easy, acceptable enough for them to mistake for surrender. 4 hours later, I was at the airport. When they arrived at noon to collect the money, they found the door locked, the locks changed, my phone dead, my Bentley gone, and an ordinary cardboard box sitting on the porch table with Emily's name written across the top in black marker. They opened it expecting a cashier's check. What they found instead was the anatomy of their ruin: betrayal, revenge, justice, and the terrible cold difference between being abandoned and finally being forced to stand without someone else's money underneath you. It begins there, I suppose. Or maybe it began long before that, in a nursery painted yellow, in a first bicycle I let go of too soon, in a college tuition payment I called love, in the first time my daughter learned that crying hard enough could move me faster than honesty ever could. The doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession that Friday evening, each chime more insistent than the last, each one striking through the quiet of my study with the sharp familiarity of an old wound being pressed. I was sitting behind my desk with a glass of bourbon and quarterly reports spread across the leather blotter, though if I am honest, I had stopped reading them 20 minutes earlier. The numbers were good. The dealerships were profitable. Inventory movement was strong. Jake Martinez had finally stabilized the Research Boulevard location after the staffing mess in January. Any other year, those reports would have given me satisfaction. The reliable pleasure of a man who built something from nothing and could still read the pulse of a business by looking at margins. That night, the numbers only looked like ammunition. Assets, liquidity, the kind of language my daughter no longer translated into work, risk, sacrifice, payroll, taxes, sleepless nights, and 32 years of shaking hands with men who would smile while trying to take 5 points off a deal. To Emily, money had become atmosphere, something that existed because it always had, something produced by my life, without needing to consider the life that produced it. Through the study window, I could see the white Tesla Model S glowing under the security lights at the end of my circular drive. Emily only rang like that when she needed money. Once, years ago, she rang once and waited because she respected houses, rhythms, and the possibility that other people were not merely waiting for her arrival. That daughter had disappeared by increments, so small I had helped hide them from myself. A late payment here, a vacation there, a down payment framed as family support, a private school tuition bill because the children deserved the best, and I could afford it, an emergency wire because Brandon's venture was about to close, and would change everything if I only trusted him one more time. Every time, I told myself, I was helping my daughter breathe. Every time, I was teaching her she did not need lungs. I walked through the marble foyer slowly, past framed family photographs arranged along the long wall with museum precision. Emily at 5, missing her front teeth, one hand gripping mine on the steps of the old house in Tarrytown. Emily at 12, in a white dress after her piano recital, furious because she had missed 3 notes, and I had told her she played beautifully anyway. Emily at 18 in a burnt orange UT sweatshirt, beaming beside me at graduation. Her mother, Margaret, standing a few inches apart from me even then. The first visible distance before the divorce. Emily at 28 on her wedding day, her arm looped through mine at the Four Seasons. Brandon waiting under flowers I had paid for, smiling with the shining confidence of a man marrying into rescue. Each image now seemed like evidence submitted against me, proof not that I had loved well, but that I had mistaken provision for parenting until it was too late to separate one from the other. When I opened the door, Emily threw her arms around me before I could speak. "Daddy," she said into my shoulder, and held on a beat too long. She smelled expensive, something floral and powdery layered over panic. The embrace felt calculated, like she was depositing emotional currency for later withdrawal. Brandon brushed past us without greeting, already inside, already claiming temperature, air, space. His designer shoes clicked against the marble as he moved toward the living room, not waiting to be invited, not even looking at the photographs of the grandchildren on the console table. He dropped into my leather chair. My chair, the one Margaret had bought me for our 20th anniversary, before love became negotiation. The leather creaked under him, and the sound landed somewhere deep and unreasonable in my chest. I followed them into the living room. Emily adjusted the strap of her designer bag, the $5,000 one I had bought her last Christmas, because she had said, with practiced lightness, that all the women at the autism charity gala had won, and she felt like a fraud carrying something from last season. Now she perched on the edge of the sofa, fingers moving to the pearls at her throat. That had always been her tell. When she was 12, she spun her grandmother's ring around her finger and denied breaking Margaret's china teacup. At 16, she twisted a charm bracelet while explaining why the dent in her first car had appeared out of nowhere. At 35, she rubbed pearls while preparing to ask for $500,000, as though she was asking to borrow a sweater. "Can I get you anything?" I asked. Water whined. "Let's cut to the chase." "Rob," Brandon said without looking up from the papers he was spreading across my coffee table. "We have a situation." Rob, not Robert, not Mr. Mitchell, not even Dad, which he had used twice in the early years before he realized it made me look at him with pity. Rob was a boundary crossing disguised as familiarity, and Brandon liked those most of all. I gripped my bourbon glass tighter and counted backward from 10. An old anger management technique I had learned after the divorce when Margaret told me that my silence frightened her more than shouting. It rarely worked anymore, but ritual can hold a man together longer than dignity sometimes. Emily's voice pitched higher. "Another tell. Daddy, you know we wouldn't come to you unless it was absolutely necessary. You've always said family comes first. And we are family. What happened to the investment property in Round Rock?" I asked. Brandon finally looked up, his expression suggesting I had asked about a meal he ate 3 weeks ago. "Market corrections. Temporary setback. That is not why we are here." Temporary setback meant loss. Market corrections meant he had ignored every warning from people who understood markets. Round Rock meant $200,000 that had disappeared 8 months earlier into a development he could never adequately describe. I watched Emily's wedding ring spin around her finger. My mother's ring, actually. I had given it to her when she married, because I thought continuity meant something. I had not understood that in Emily's hands inheritance could become costume. The thing is, Emily started, then stopped, then looked at Brandon the way a weak actress looks to a director when she has forgotten her line. Brandon has been working so hard on this new venture. It is very promising, revolutionary, really. "How much?" I interrupted. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked through 3 long seconds of silence. Brandon's cologne was thick in the room, expensive and excessive, fighting with the oak and vanilla of my bourbon. Emily's heel clicked against the marble floor in a nervous rhythm that sounded almost like a countdown. "It's really not that much for someone with your assets," Brandon said, leaning back in my chair as if testing its comfort for future ownership. $500,000. We need it in our account by noon tomorrow." The room tilted slightly. My migraine began behind my left eye, a needle of pressure pushing outward, familiar and unwelcome. 500,000, not 50, not 100, $500,000 delivered as casually as a dinner reservation. My mind did the calculation instantly, because numbers had always been safer than emotion. 500,000 was payroll for several locations. It was a building renovation. It was tuition for the grandchildren for years. It was a respectable house in some parts of Texas. It was also less than I had already given them if you counted without mercy. And I had begun counting without mercy months ago. I started, then stopped. Memories flooded in, not gently but like intruders. Teaching Emily to ride her bike in Zilker Park, running behind her with one hand on the seat until she shouted, "Let go, Daddy, let go." And I did. And she made it 10 yards before falling into the grass and laughing with blood on her knee. Emily's college graduation at UT, her cap crooked, her mother crying into a tissue, me pretending not to cry because fathers of daughters perform strength until the moment strength becomes useless. Walking her down the aisle at the Four Seasons, feeling her hand tremble on my arm, believing it was love, not calculation, that made her squeeze so tightly. Had that girl ever existed? Or had I built her from memory because the woman in my living room was too painful to recognize? "Daddy," Emily said, "we wouldn't ask if we had any other option." Her fingers left the pearls and moved toward her eyes. No tears yet, just the gesture, the mortgage, the kids' schools. You know how expensive everything has got. I did know. I paid for those schools directly, $15,000 per child per semester at St. Andrews, because Emily said public school would crush Sophie's creativity, and Max needed smaller class sizes to thrive. I had covered the down payment on their Westlake home, $200,000, because they had found their forever house and just needed help bridging the gap. I paid for the summer camps, the tutors, the orthodontist, the last-minute flights, the emergency repairs, and the quiet, invisible costs of keeping their life impressive enough to photograph. Brandon stood, walked to my bar without invitation, and poured himself 3 fingers of my 25-year Macallan. Not a splash, not a polite pour, a man pouring from another man's bottle, as if entitlement had matured in oak. "These aren't bank people we're dealing with, Rob," he said. "They're serious individuals. Would hate for this to affect your reputation at the country club or the dealerships." The threat hung in the air like his cologne. Obvious, overwhelming, nauseating. I felt my blood pressure spike. The migraine expanded across my skull. I gripped the mantle to steady myself, and Emily saw the movement. Her eyes flicked from my hand to my face. Not with fear, not with concern, but measurement. There it was, the arithmetic of exploitation. How weak is he tonight? How much pressure before collapse? How quickly can guilt be converted into funds? "Daddy, you look pale," she said. That was when she said the words that changed everything. If Mom were still alive, she would be ashamed of how you're treating us. The sentence was wrong in every possible way, and she knew it. Margaret was not dead. Margaret lived in Houston with her second husband, a quiet, retired pediatrician named Daniel who collected old maps and treated her with more kindness than I had managed during our last years together. Margaret and I had divorced 10 years earlier, painfully, expensively, and not without blame on both sides. But we had not become enemies. We had become something stranger. 2 people who had failed each other and still loved the same daughter enough to lie to ourselves for too long. Emily used Margaret's name the way some people use knives. And the blade always found soft tissue because Emily knew where grief and guilt lived even when the person had not actually died. In her mythology, Margaret was saint, witness, and weapon. A mother who would have understood. A mother who would have given. A mother who would be ashamed of me. "Your mother," I said slowly, "would have told you to get jobs." Brandon barked a laugh from my bar, still holding my scotch like he had earned it. "Jobs? I'm an entrepreneur, Rob. I create jobs. 3 failed startups in 5 years. A cryptocurrency disaster I had warned him about last Christmas. A consulting firm that never consulted anyone. An app that was going to disrupt boutique luxury home services, though no one could explain what that meant. I had funded all of them. Everyone, watching money disappear into Brandon's delusions of grandeur, while Emily called them investments in our family's future. It amazed me now how often the word future had been used to rob the present. "You missed Sophie's recital last month," Emily said, changing tactic. Her voice trembled with manufactured hurt. "And Max's soccer tournament. But you always have time for quarterly reports." Those quarterly reports kept Sophie in ballet and Max in cleats that cost more than my first car payment. Those reports kept the Tesla charged, the country club dues paid, the Westlake address respectable. Those reports represented hundreds of employees, with families of their own. But I did not say that. Instead, I watched Emily's mascara finally run in too perfect stream. Too perfect. She had learned how to cry without losing control of her face. "Let me understand this," I said. releasing the mantle and standing straighter despite the pain. You need $500,000 by noon tomorrow, and you still have not told me exactly why. Brandon and Emily exchanged the glance married couples perfect over years of coordinated deception. His jaw tightened, her fingers froze on the pearls. Real estate opportunity, Brandon said. Time sensitive, can't miss this window. You just said you lost money on real estate in Round Rock. That was different. How? Brandon's knuckles whitened around one of the documents. This is cryptocurrency. This is tied to digital property instruments. It's more sophisticated than old-school real estate. You wouldn't understand the structure. The slip was small but fatal. Crypto, not real estate, not a property, not a bridge loan. The same flashing neon error I had seen before and funded anyway because my daughter had cried and said the children might lose their home. My left hand started trembling. A new development in my 60s that embarrassed me more than pain. I shoved it into my pocket. Emily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, typed quickly, then placed it face down. Daddy, she said, we have supported you through so much. When you and Mom divorced, who stood by you? When the economy tanked in 2020, who helped keep the dealerships running? You were in Cabo that entire summer, I said. You posted about it daily. That's not fair. The wedding, I said, 100,000. The house down payment, 200,000. Brandon's first startup, 150,000. The second, 80,000. The third, that's ancient history. Brandon snapped, standing now trying to use height as argument. We are talking about our future. Your grandchildren's future. The grandchildren. Sophie with her missing front tooth. And shy smile when she asked if Grandpa could come to Grandparents' Day. Max with his baseball glove and solemn questions about engine. The children whose lives I had protected from their parents' instability. The children who would be the next weapon. Because Emily knew there were still parts of me she could reach by saying their name. Emily stood too. She lifted a framed photo from her bag and placed it on the coffee table. I recognized it immediately. SeaWorld. She was 7, wearing a pink cap, sitting on my shoulders, laughing into the sun. I remembered buying her a stuffed dolphin that day. I remembered her falling asleep in the car on the way back, her sticky hand wrapped around 2 of my fingers. She had brought the photograph as a prop. Brandon stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. The one he claimed came from rugby at Vanderbilt, though I suspected it came from something uglier. These are not just debts, Rob. These are obligations. Serious people, serious consequences. Tomorrow noon or things get complicated for everyone. Your reputation, the dealerships, that nice club membership. Are you threatening me in my own house? I asked. My voice dropped so low Emily flinched. We're being honest about reality, she said. But her voice wavered now because this version of me had rarely appeared in front of her. Daddy, please. We need this tomorrow. Noon. That is not negotiable. The room felt suffocating despite the central air. The migraine pulsed in time with the grandfather clock. Brandon's cologne seemed to coat my tongue. Emily's tears had smeared her eye makeup into something almost theatrical. I looked at them both. My daughter who had become a stranger and her husband who had never pretended to be anything but a parasite. Outside, suburban Austin continued its quiet evening routine. Sprinklers clicked on somewhere. A dog barked once and stopped. The world did not care that a family was being dismantled in my living room, one polite sentence at a time. Fine, I said. Emily blinked. Brandon's shoulders relaxed. Tomorrow, Emily rushed forward, mistaking exhaustion for capitulation. Arms outstretched for another embrace. I stepped back. Her arms fell empty. Brandon extended his hand, gripping too hard when I accepted, pressing his thumb into the web of my hand like a man establishing dominance he had never earned. We knew you'd understand, he said. Family first, right, Daddy, Emily added. They walked out without another word. Brandon's hand rested possessively on Emily's lower back, guiding her like she was a casino chip he had just won. I stood in the doorway and watched the white Tesla's tail lights fade down the street, then disappear around the corner onto Westlake Drive. I waited exactly 5 minutes after their tail lights vanished before making the first call. James Walker answered on the second ring despite the hour. 25 years of friendship and legal counsel meant he knew my patterns. I did not call after 9. Unless something had broken beyond repair. They finally crossed the line, didn't they, he said. There was no surprise in his voice, only resignation. Noon tomorrow, I said, like I'm an ATM, with a withdrawal limit they've finally exceeded. The house transfer paperwork is already filed, James said. I heard papers shuffling on his end. though I knew he had probably been sitting in his office waiting for this call. They do not know it yet. Emily's name was never on that deed. You insisted on keeping it in your name when you funded the down payment. You called it caution. I called it the only sane thing you had done in that entire arrangement. What about Margaret? She's expecting your call. She said it is about time you stopped enabling them. I hung up and went to my office. The migraine had shifted from explosive pain to cold clarity. My laptop opened to an email confirmation from 3 weeks earlier. Villa Las Palmas, Costa Rica, March 17 through April 17. Your reservation is confirmed. It had been planned as a retirement reset. A month to decide what came next after transferring more operations to Jake. Now it would serve a cleaner purpose. I called American Airlines. The automated system asked cheerful questions, while my life reorganized itself around escape. The morning flight could be moved to 6:45 a.m. First class still available. One passenger. I confirmed. My home safe opened with a combination I had never shared with anyone. Not Emily, not Margaret when we were married. Inside were labeled folders arranged with the obsessive precision that had made me successful and lonely. 20 years of documentation. Every check, wire transfer, promissory note, tuition payment, emergency transfer. Brandon's signed agreement from December 2023, swearing it would be the last request. Emily's Instagram posts printed and dated, showing the contradiction between poverty claims and luxury consumption. Cabo, Napa, Uche, the domain, designer bags, charity galas funded by silent parental subsidy. There were text transcripts Margaret had forwarded months earlier from Emily's friends. Messages Emily thought were private because entitlement assumes the world is full of locked doors until someone wealthy enough opens them. Dad's too pathetic to say no. He'll cave. He always does. I deserve this money more than he does, because at least I know how to enjoy it. I found an old Amazon box in the garage, ordinary and unremarkable. Inside, I arranged 3 document sets with lawyerly care. First, the deed history proving that their Westlake house had never legally belonged to Emily or Brandon in the way they believe. Second, the complete transfer history totaling $1, $3 million over 8 years, not including tuition, not including gifts below reporting thresholds, not including the emotional cost no ledger could carry. Third, the legal notices James had prepared months earlier, and I had refused to send because a father can be brave in business and cowardly in love. At the bottom, I placed a USB drive containing security footage from my own home. Tonight's confrontation, other confrontations, holiday dinners, where Brandon joked about bleeding the old man dry. Emily coaching him in my kitchen before asking for another bridge loan. Their laughter after one Thanksgiving dinner when they thought I had gone upstairs, but the security microphone in the hallway caught every word. On top, I placed one note. You wanted it tomorrow. Here is what you are really getting. Packing took 30 minutes. 2 suitcases, tropical clothing, medication, essential documents, a few photographs I could not leave behind. My dealership manager, Jake, received a brief email. Family emergency. You are in charge. Details to follow. I stood in the hallway looking at the portrait we had taken 5 years ago at Laguna Gloria. Emily's smile looked genuine, but by then I could no longer trust my memory. I lifted the heavy frame off the wall, turned it backward, and rehung it so the blank backing faced outward. It looked more honest that way. In the kitchen, I removed one drawing from the refrigerator. Grandpa and me fishing at Lake Travis, written in Max's crooked hand beneath 2 stick figures beside a blue scribble of water. I folded it carefully and placed it in my wallet. The children were not responsible for their parents' choices. I set the box on the porch table where Emily would find it. Then I went upstairs, set the alarm for 4, and lay in bed without sleep. The house made its usual sounds, air moving through vents, ice maker dropping cubes, distant hum of the pool pump, all the familiar domestic machinery of a life I was abandoning not because I hated it, but because staying had become a form of consent. At 4, the alarm cut through darkness. No snooze, no hesitation. I showered, dressed, drank coffee from a mug Emily had given me 10 years earlier and forgotten about immediately after Mother's Day passed. Through the kitchen window, Austin's skyline began its slow awakening. I moved through the house once more, room by room, not sentimentally but methodically, documenting absence inside myself. The master bedroom still held Margaret's mother's portrait, the one Emily had always wanted but never asked for without calculation. Emily's childhood room, converted into an office, still had one shelf of trophies I had never boxed. State debate champion, National Honor Society, UT acceptance letter framed, the daughter I raised versus the woman who demanded money 12 hours ago. I did not cry. That worried me more than tears would have. The Bentley purred to life in the garage. I chose it over the Tesla because Brandon had too many assumptions about electric cars and inheritance. The streets of Westlake Hills were empty, except for garbage trucks beginning their routes. I drove past Emily's neighborhood, every house dark, peaceful. They were sleeping, probably dreaming of the ways they would spend my money. The radio played classic rock, and the Eagles' Take It Easy filled the cabin. The irony almost made me laugh. James's office occupied the 42nd floor of the Frost Bank Tower. At 5, the building was mostly empty, except for security guards and the obsessively ambitious. James waited in the conference room with Sophia Chen, his paralegal, documents spread across mahogany with military precision. A box of Krispy Kreme donuts sat in the center, our tradition for major deals since 1999. You look surprisingly rested, James said, sliding power of attorney documents across the table. First good night's sleep in months, I lied. I signed with my father's fountain pen, the one Emily did not know existed, because not every inheritance was displayed where appetite could see it. Limited scope, I see, I said. 60-day expiration, only property transfers and financial restructuring. Can't have me selling your organs after all, James said. The joke landed weakly, because none of us were in a joking room. Sophia presented the property documentation. The interesting part, Mr. Mitchell, is timing. The transfer executed yesterday at 4 p.m. before they came to your house. Legally, the Westlake property is already under your control pursuant to the original ownership structure and default provisions from the support agreement they signed in 2020. 3 hours before Emily arrived demanding money, she had already lost the largest asset she thought she owned. The house she posted constantly, the staircase where she posed her children in matching Christmas pajamas, the kitchen island where she filmed charity planning reels. It had never been hers in the way she understood possession. She had signed every document. She had read none. The financial lockdown, I asked. Executed at midnight, James said. Joint accounts frozen. Credit cards in your name suspended. The children's tuition remains on auto pay through December. We are not punishing them. He produced another folder, thicker than the rest. The nuclear option, as discussed. Inside lay the transcripts, the footage inventory, Brandon's promissory notes, the prenup he had signed before the wedding, heavily modified by lawyers Brandon did not respect enough to fear. James tapped page 47, gambling addiction clause, immediate forfeiture of marital claims if undisclosed gambling debts exceed $50,000. He crossed that threshold 3 years ago. Current documented exposure is just over 500,000. Sophia looked uncomfortable. Mr. Mitchell, this is remarkably thorough. 5 years of preparation, I said. I kept hoping I would never need it. James looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Men like us often mistake postponement for mercy. At 6 sharp, I stood and shook his hand. The elevator descended alone, each floor marking another layer of distance. Outside, the valet had my Bentley waiting. I handed him an envelope. Jake Martinez will pick this up Monday. The young man nodded. Everything all right, sir. Better than it has been in years. I drove toward Austin Bergstrom as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the city gold. My phone buzzed with Emily's name. Then again's, then Brandon's, then Emily. I watched the calls appear and disappear. 10 years ago, I would have answered before the second ring, terrified something had happened to the grandchildren. Now I recognized the sound for what it was. Entitlement, discovering delay. At the airport, I checked in with 2 bags and a carry-on. Michelle at the first class counter recognized me from years of business trips. Costa Rica today, Mr. Mitchell. That's right. Business or pleasure? I considered the question. Neither, I said. Personal. I handed her a sealed envelope. Someone may come asking about me later. Emily Carter. Verify her ID before giving her this. Michelle's professionalism did not waver. Of course. Inside was a key to a storage unit. The unit held 20 years of Emily's childhood possessions I had saved, because fathers are archivists of people who no longer exist. Photo albums, school projects, letters, her grandmother's jewelry she assumed lost during the divorce. A savings bond Margaret had insisted we leave untouched. $50,000, maturing in April 2026. Not rescue, not now, a delayed mirror. I moved through TSA, bought coffee at Austin Java, powered off my phone, removed the SIM card, and dropped both into a trash bin. First class boarded at 6:15. Seat 2A. Window. Left side. The flight attendant offered champagne, though it was barely morning. I accepted. A familiar voice stopped me. "Excuse me." Margaret stood in the aisle with designer luggage and the composed expression she had worn through our divorce. She settled into 2B across the aisle, close enough to talk, far enough to honor the boundaries we had built from the ruins of marriage. "James called," she said. "Thought you might need backup. It's not your fight anymore." She looked at me. "Hasn't been for 10 years, but she is still my daughter." We sat in silence as the final passengers boarded. "You knew this was coming," I said. "Mothers know sooner. Fathers pay longer." That was brutal. That was true. The captain announced our departure. The door closed with pneumatic finality. Engines roared. Austin fell away beneath us, hills and lakes shrinking into abstract geometry. Somewhere below, Emily's alarm would ring. In 4 hours, she would arrive at my empty house. In 5, she would open the box. In 6, the life she had built on my inability to say no would begin collapsing. The flight attendant appeared with breakfast menus. "Business or pleasure?" she asked. I looked at Margaret. "Neither," I said. "Justice." Margaret laughed, the first genuine laugh I had heard from her in years. "That's the Robert I married." At exactly noon, while Emily expected $500,000, I was having lunch above the Caribbean. I learned what happened next the way I learned most things about Emily's life in those years. Second-hand, through cameras, witnesses, receipts, and the careful reports of people paid to document what love had once hidden. James sent me the security footage 3 days later. I watched it on my laptop from the balcony in Costa Rica, with Pacific waves below, and Margaret painting a terrible blue seascape beside me. The timestamp read 12:15:23. Emily's white Mercedes pulled into my driveway with the confidence of a woman coming to collect what she believed was inevitable. Brandon checked his phone, later confirmed to be tracking basketball scores. Emily applied lipstick in the mirror, the same red shade she had worn when asking for her first car at 16, the wedding down payment at 28, the $500,000 demand at 35. They walked to the door like they owned it. Emily rang once this time. A normal ring, not the demanding triple press from the night before. She waited 10 seconds, rang again. Brandon cupped his hands to the side window and peered into my kitchen. "His car is gone," Emily said. "He has 5 cars," Brandon replied. "Maybe he went to get cash from the bank." They tried the door at 12:18. Emily's key scraped uselessly against the new lock. Confusion crossed her face, then irritation, then the beginning of fear. Brandon spotted the box at 12:20. Emily opened it casually, probably expecting a gift, an apology, some symbolic gesture before the wire hit. The first document she pulled out was the deed package. Her expression changed in a way no father should ever have to watch, not because she was suffering, but because the suffering revealed what mattered most. Not betrayal, not loss of relationship. Property. Brandon snatched the paper from her hand. "What do you mean it's in his name?" "Mrs. Chen next door, 4 feet 11 inches of neighborhood vigilance." Watched from her garden and later told James she had never heard such panic from rich people before. Emily pulled out the spreadsheet next. Every transfer, every gift, every loan, every tuition payment, total $1, $3 million over 8 years, not including the house. Her hand trembled when she reached the bottom line. Then came the photographs. Brandon at the Palms Casino the previous week. Brandon at Velvet Room. Brandon signing markers. Brandon's promissory note from December. Emily's text. "Dad's too pathetic to say no. He'll cave. He always does." Her phone began buzzing at 12:23. The first declined transaction. Then another. Then another. Chase Sapphire. American Express Platinum. Nordstrom. All suspended. All in my name. All dead. She found the USB drive at 12:25. Plugged it into her phone with shaking hands. Her own voice came through the tiny speaker. "Just take whatever he gives you. He's too pathetic to say no." Then Brandon's voice. "These aren't bank people, Rob. They're serious individuals." Then Thanksgiving laughter. Then the Christmas toast, where Brandon thanked good old Dad, the family bank. Emily's face crumpled. Not beautifully, not theatrically. Her sobbing became raw, ugly, humiliating. It was the sound of someone realizing that the audience had left, and the stage lights were still on. Brandon threw his Hermes briefcase at my door at 12:27. The handle broke, papers scattered. Emily collapsed on the porch steps, designer dress wrinkling against concrete I had resurfaced the previous summer. Mrs. Chen emerged with her phone held like a weapon. I am calling the police if you do not leave. This is my father's house, Emily screamed. Not anymore, Mrs. Chen said. Mr. Mitchell sent me the property transfer notice this morning. You are trespassing. Brandon stormed to the car at 12:30, leaving Emily to gather the papers alone. He peeled out, leaving tire marks on the driveway that the property manager later billed to their account. At 12:45, when Emily discovered her inheritance had evaporated, I was sitting at a beachside restaurant in Costa Rica. The waiter asked if I was celebrating something. A graduation, I told him. Your child, he asked. No, I said. Mind. The following days unfolded like a slow public collapse. Emily returned to my house Sunday morning with a locksmith who refused the job after verifying ownership. She tried calling employees from an old dealership directory she had stolen years earlier. Jake blocked her after the third call. She went to the airport demanding passenger information. American Airlines told her the passenger had specifically requested no contact. She sat in the terminal for 2 hours, then took Uber after Uber across Austin, visiting my club, my barber, 3 restaurants where she thought someone might know my location. At each stop, the answer was the same. No. Monday became her legal education day. 4 law firms, 4 consultations, 4 polite dismantlings. These documents are enforceable. You need a retainer. Do you have access to funds? I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, but your father appears to have acted within his rights. On Tuesday, the creditors came. Not bank people in cheap suits. 2 men in Italian leather who knocked politely at Emily's condo and spoke softly enough that the building security camera caught posture, not words. They left a card with a phone number and no name. By Wednesday, Brandon was gone. He left no dramatic note at first, only absence. His phone off, his closet emptied of expensive watches and passport. His mother called my office crying and asking if I knew where her son was. Emily filed a missing person report. Police found his car at the airport later. Long-term parking. A ticket to Vegas purchased but never used. Weeks later, TMZ posted a grainy photo of him behind a car rental counter in Juarez, thinner, ringless, wearing a name tag that said Brian. Emily commented 2 words before deleting them. Good riddance, but anger did not pay rent. The credit cards were dead. Condo mortgage had been 3 months behind because Brandon had handled the finances and never mentioned. The eviction notice arrived April 15. Emily came home from her first day at Nordstrom, still wearing the employee name tag of a store where she had once spent thousands monthly, and found the paper taped to her door. She sold what she could. Designer bags worth $30,000 brought $8,000. Jewelry worth $50,000 brought $15,000. Brandon's watches brought $12,000. Wedding china no one wanted. Waterford crystal for $50. Her wedding dress, preserved in acid-free tissue, received no offer. The garage sale became neighborhood entertainment. A year earlier, she had hosted a charity gala. Now women she once judged walked past folding tables and whispered behind sunglasses. She rented a studio above a taco shop on East Riverside, 400 square feet, window air conditioner rattling like coins in a cup, shared laundry in a basement that smelled of mildew. $700 a month, cash only, no credit check. She took a second job at Denny's, 11 at night to 7 in the morning. The same Denny's where she had once demanded a manager over cold eggs. Now she served drunk college students and exhausted nurses coffee for $2.13 an hour plus tip. Her schedule became machinery. Nordstrom at 6, home by 3, sleep until 10, Denny's at 11, repeat, Sundays for laundry. Groceries at the Asian market on North Lamar, rice, beans, cheap chicken, meal prep on one working burner. Margaret visited her in May. She called me afterward from her hotel room. She has your letter on a shelf, Margaret said. The one I sent from Costa Rica. Yes, and the graduation photo. How does she look? Hungry, Margaret said. Tired, human. Their conversation was not warm. It was better than warm. It was honest. I helped your father plan this, Margaret told her. I know, Emily said. Are you angry? I was. Now I'm too tired to be angry. The bond was my idea. I know. It is not rescue. I know that too. Do you? Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think I'm starting to. On June 10, Emily received my letter. I wrote it on a beach in Costa Rica, after watching a little girl chase waves with the same fearless entitlement Emily once had before entitlement became poisoned by comfort. I told her I did not blame her entirely for becoming who she became, because I had created her every time I rewarded tears. Every time I wrote a check instead of asking a question. Every time I called rescue love. I told her work teaches what inheritance never could, that every dollar earned carries weight, that gifts without weight had hollowed her out. I told her I loved her, but love without respect was only pity. I told her to earn my respect, and more importantly, her own. I told her her grandmother had been a waitress when she met my father, and that I was ashamed I had hidden that from Emily because I had mistaken struggle for embarrassment instead of inheritance. Emily carried that letter in her Denny's apron for a week. A coworker later told Margaret she read it during breaks and cried in the bathroom. Not performance tears, private ones, kind with no audience and no reward. She wrote back 5 days later. Dad, she began, I am writing this at 3 in the morning between jobs. My feet hurt, my back aches. I have never been happier. Not happy like champagne and shopping happy. Happy like I earned this sandwich happy. Happy like I paid my rent happy. Happy like a customer asked for me by name and meant it. I was so angry when you left. I thought you abandoned me. Now I understand you did not abandon me. You freed me from myself, or maybe you forced me to meet myself, which felt like abandonment because I had avoided her for so long. Brandon is gone. Good. He was my mirror. We were parasites feeding off each other's entitlement. And when the host disappeared, we had nothing. I do not want your money anymore. That is not bravado. I still need help someday if I want more than survival. But I want help to become seed, not rescue. Come back when you are ready. Not to save me, just to see me. The real me, if she is still there. I read the letter twice. Margaret read over my shoulder. She gets it, she said. Getting it and living it are different things. Give her time. How much? Margaret looked at the ocean. How long did it take you to really change? I did not answer. I was still changing. I returned to Austin on August 15. Same airport, same gate. 5 months felt like 5 years. Margaret stayed in Costa Rica. This is your journey to finish, she said. I rented a modest sedan instead of calling for a driver. Checked into a Hampton Inn instead of the Four Seasons. At 4 in the afternoon, I stood inside Nordstrom at Barton Creek Mall and watched my daughter from across the floor. Emily knelt beside an elderly woman, helping adjust a shoe strap with patience I did not recognize. She was thinner, stronger, her hair pulled back. No expensive makeup, no jewelry except a simple watch. She moved with purpose instead of display. When I approached and asked for comfortable walking shoes, she turned, froze, and for a moment we were both trapped between the girl on the bicycle and the woman on the porch. Dad, she said. Hello, Emily. Neither of us moved. Then she laughed softly. You are shopping at Nordstrom. You haven't bought your own clothes in 20 years. Things change. Yes, she said, they do. She could not leave the floor, so I stayed as a customer. We talked carefully while she showed me shoes. You look different, I said. I am different. Poverty is an effective diet plan. She smiled without bitterness. It's not poverty, it's reality. Same thing when you're used to fantasy. She rang up the shoes and applied her employee discount without asking. Pride in a small gesture. I get off at 6, she said. Denny's at 11. Can we have dinner between? I can take you somewhere. I can't afford dinner out. I'll cook, she said, if you can handle my apartment. Her studio was tiny and immaculate. 1 chair, 1 stool. She gave me the chair. On the wall hung the graduation photo. On a shelf sat my financial literacy books from the library, and a jar labeled rent. She cooked pasta with cheap vegetables and a sauce she had learned from a coworker. We ate from mismatched plates at a table barely large enough for 2. I hated you, she said suddenly. I know. I mean really hated you. I wanted you to suffer. I know. How could you leave me with nothing? I looked around the small room. How could I leave you with everything when it was killing you? Her face tightened. Then she nodded. It was killing both of us. At 9, before she dressed for Denny's, I took an envelope from my jacket. This is not rescue. It is an offer. Inside was a contract. A real one. Fair salary. No special treatment. Performance metrics. A project I had been considering since Costa Rica. Financial literacy workshops for young adults through a foundation funded separately from the dealership. Emily understood the cost of ignorance and entitlement better than anyone I knew. I'm not qualified, she said. You are uniquely qualified. You have been rich without understanding money, and poor enough to learn what it means. You know both languages now. And if I fail, then you're fired, daughter or not. She read the contract slowly, 3 times, like a woman who had finally learned that signatures are dangerous when treated like ceremony instead of commitment. 1 month later, she accepted and kept Denny's weekends for 6 more months. because she wanted a backup plan. That was when I knew something in her had truly shifted. Not healed, shifted. Healing was too clean a word for what had happened to us. Her first workshop had 12 attendees. A year later, she was speaking at colleges. 2 years later, she was writing curriculum for school district. When the bond matured, she did not touch it for rescue. She used it as part of a down payment only after saving enough of her own money to make the house hers in a way no gift had ever been. Brandon never returned, though someone once sent James a photo of him beside a wealthy widow in Cancun, smiling the same smile he wore in my leather chair. Cycles repeat when no one breaks them. Thanksgiving 2025, Emily hosted dinner in her studio. Margaret brought sides. I brought wine. We sat on the floor around a coffee table because there were not enough chairs. Emily raised a plastic cup of water because she was working later that night. To family, she said. To lessons learned, Margaret added. To starting over, I said. We clinked plastic and glass in a room too small for pretense. For a moment, it felt like victory, but I have learned to distrust clean endings. We did not get back the years. I did not get back the daughter I had raised, and she did not get back the father who believed money could soften every fall. Brandon had taken pieces. I had taken others. Emily had taken plenty from herself. What remained was not restoration. It was something leaner, quieter, less beautiful, and more honest. The fortune I spent my life building was still large enough to impress strangers, but I no longer measured wealth that way. Real wealth was sitting in that tiny room watching my daughter pass a plate she had paid for herself, watching her look tired and proud and unrescued, watching Margaret smile with sadness because mothers understand that survival is not innocence restored. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not money, not forgiveness, not comfort. Sometimes it is the locked door, the empty account, the box on the porch, the cold and brutal chance to stand alone before there is nothing left of them capable of standing at all. I lost the daughter I had imagined years before the money ran out. What I found after the collapse was not the same person. It was not better in the easy sense. It was not clean. It was a woman with scars, overdue humility, and hands roughened by work. It was a father who had learned that love can become cowardice when it refuses to let consequences arrive. We survived each other. That was not the ending I wanted. It was the only honest one left.